All right, let's get right into it. Think about this. Every single time you take a medicine, anything from a simple painkiller to a critical life-saving drug, there's this whole invisible process working in the background, pretty much to keep you safe. It's called pharmaceutical validation. And today, we're going to pull back that curtain and see what this unseen shield is all about.
So, why is this process so incredibly important? Well, to really get it, you have to understand the stakes. In the world of making medicines, there is just no room for error. Zero. The consequences of getting it wrong are, well, they're massive, both in terms of money and even more importantly, for people's health.
Just stop and think about that for a second. Imagine you're sick, you're counting on a treatment to get better, and what if that pill you take is basically useless, like a sugar pill, all because something went wrong when it was being made? That risk to the patient, that's the absolute #1 thing everyone is trying to prevent.
And then there's the money side of things. We're talking about a huge business impact. A single failed batch of a drug, it can cost a company millions. I mean millions upon millions of dollars. That's just gone. Wasted materials, lost production time, massive recalls. It's an absolutely catastrophic financial hit. But honestly, as big as that financial cost is, it's nothing compared to the human cost. An ineffective drug is one thing, right? But a drug that's contaminated or made incorrectly, that can cause real, serious harm to someone. That's the nightmare scenario, and it's what the entire industry works around the clock to prevent.
So how do we stop this from ever happening? How can we possibly guarantee that every single tablet, every capsule, every vial of medicine is perfectly safe and does exactly what it's supposed to do? The answer, you guessed it, is validation. This is that essential shield we're talking about, standing right between all the manufacturing variables and you, the patient. Okay, let's break down that definition. The key word here, the most important word, is proving. Validation isn't about just hoping or assuming that things work. No way. It's all about generating hard evidence, documented proof that a process is going to deliver the exact same high-quality result consistently every single time. And this leads to what is basically the unbreakable mantra of the entire pharmaceutical industry. If it is not written down, it did not happen. It sounds simple, but this phrase is the absolute core of validation. Every test, every single result, every little calibration, it all has to be meticulously documented. Because without that paper trail, as far as anyone is concerned, the work was never even done.
So what's the whole point of validation? What's it really trying to do? Well, it pretty much boils down to 3 main goals. First, and most important, is making sure that every medicine is safe and effective for the patient. It also acts as this critical guardrail against any kind of contamination. And finally, it proves that the company is following all the strict global rules, which are known as Good Manufacturing Practices, or GMP.
Okay, so we've covered the what's and the whys. But how does this actually get done? Well, the work is usually split into 4 main categories. You can think of them as the 4 pillars that hold up the entire building of quality assurance.
So these 4 pillars are process, cleaning, analytical, and equipment validation. Process validation is the big picture. It looks at the entire journey, from raw materials all the way to the finished product. Cleaning validation is, oh man, it's so critical. It makes sure that tiny trace amounts of one drug don't accidentally end up in the next drug being made on the same machines. Then you've got analytical validation, which proves that all the lab tests they use for quality control are accurate. And last, equipment validation, which confirms the machinery itself is installed right and working perfectly.
Let's make this a little more real. Picture a gigantic industrial mixer, the kind that blends all the active ingredients for a medicine. If it spins too slow, the drug won't be mixed evenly. If it spins too fast, you could actually damage the ingredients. Validation is the whole process of running documented tests to find that perfect speed, lock it in, and prove that it works long before you ever make a batch that goes to patients.
Why don't we zoom in on one of these pillars to see how it really works? Let's use equipment validation as our example, mainly because it follows this really clear, logical path through 3 distinct stages.
First up, you've got IQ, which stands for Installation Qualification. This is basically asking, did we get the right machine, and is it all hooked up correctly? Simple enough. Next is OQ, or Operational Qualification. This is where we test every single button, every sensor, every alarm, to prove it works exactly like the manual says it should. And finally, you have PQ, Performance Qualification. This is the real test. We run the machine with actual product materials to prove it can consistently make a quality product under real-world conditions.
Now, here's a really common mistake people make.
They think validation is a one-and-done kind of thing. You do the tests, sign the papers, and you're finished. But that could not be further from the truth. Real validation is a living, breathing process that goes on for the entire life of a product.
It all starts with Stage 1, process design. This is where you figure out all the important settings, like that mixer speed we talked about, before you even start. Then comes Stage 2, process qualification, which is where you run all those IQ, OQ, and PQ tests using smaller pilot batches. And this leads to the most important part, the long-term view. Stage 3, continued verification. This means you are constantly monitoring production data to make sure nothing has changed or drifted out of spec over time.
So, with all this complexity, there are really two golden rules that stand out above everything else. These are totally non-negotiable, and everybody in the industry has to live by them. Getting these two things right is just fundamental.
The first rule builds right on that life cycle idea we just talked about. You are never, ever done with validation. A process isn't just validated one time. It has to be kept in a validated state, and that means anytime something significant changes, you have to go back and look at it again.
Let me give you an example. Let's say you upgrade a really important part on that industrial mixer. If you don't revalidate the process, you're basically flying blind. You have no documented proof that this new part hasn't messed up the final product. But with revalidation, you prove the process is still under control and that the quality is still there. It's really that simple.
And that brings us to the second golden rule, which really ties everything together. Remember that phrase? If it's not written down, it didn't happen. And hey, if you're new to the industry, listen up, because this is for you. The single most important thing you can do, hands down, is master your good manufacturing practices or GMP documentation skills. I'm telling you, your ability to clearly and accurately record what you do, that is the absolute bedrock of all validation.
So, let's pull all of this together. We've talked about the what, the why, and the how of validation. But at the end of the day, what's the real impact of getting all this stuff right?
Well, a really strong validation program means you get the highest possible levels of patient safety and product quality. That's a given. But at the same time, it drives your regulatory risk way, way down, making sure you can meet the strict standards of agencies like the FDA and other big international bodies. It's all about maximizing the good stuff while minimizing the bad.
So, if you're just starting your career in the pharmaceutical world, here's the key thing to take away. Before you even worry about all the complex science, focus on the fundamentals. Become an absolute expert at clear, concise, and accurate GMP documentation. It is truly the most valuable skill you can build.
And that's our look at pharmaceutical validation. It's a complex and super rigorous process for sure, but it's all designed for one reason: to make sure the medicine we all rely on is safe and effective. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it, what other invisible processes like this are working behind the scenes to protect us in our daily lives.